welcome to the episode today, and thank you very much for taking this time out. I think our conversation is going to help a lot of people, as you are one of the experienced leadership coach in the industry or in the country or in Italian, we can say. But if before we go further, if we can just briefly introduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm Daryl. I'm a leadership and relationship coach. I've been doing that for the past 15 years or so, mainly working in consultancies in the UK. So I've worked with leaders from across the globe and, yeah, probably over 5,000 leaders, I think, now.
Okay.
So I've seen and heard a lot of different things, and I guess I can bring that to the table when working with different people. So hopefully I have enough knowledge and experience to help people work through various problems.
Yeah, that's nice. One thing I want to ask you, as you have worked with so many leaders, like thousands, what are the main qualities of a good leader that you think, yeah, these are actually the good quality and just not on paper?
Classic question.
Yeah.
Easy one to start with, thank you. I think just being curious. So I mean, I have 4 leadership principles, and they are curiosity, compassion, I've forgotten one, consistency, and then connection. So if you have all of those, I think it makes you a good leader. If you're genuinely curious about people and interested, then that's already putting you ahead of everybody else. And then having a compassion, so wanting to understand people and help them to get to where they want to be, then those are, I think, 2 of the key qualities that I think, yeah, you won't see written down anywhere.
Okay, but when you go to these, let's just say, first meeting with these leaders, what do you think are the main qualities from these are missing that you see in your discovery call, let's just call it?
I mean, it depends. The people that I tend to speak to, they are interested in self-development and growth and learning, and that, again, that's another key aspect of a great leader, somebody who wants to learn and get better. I guess some of the challenges that people face, maybe some of the technical or the competencies, so how to delegate effectively, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with uncomfortable situations, and then, yeah, just how can they improve themselves and others, basically.
Okay, we will go into conflict in the later part of our discussion, but I just want to again, like you said, compassion. So you think the leaders who are, let's just say, senior level leaders, do they actually have, what is the level of their compassion towards the people they're working with? Or they are fully focused on being more efficient, growing their company and growing their profits? Where do you see the balance there?
It's a really good question. I don't know, to be honest, because I think it varies from company to company. Mm-hmm. I think one of the key elements for if we're lacking compassion or people are struggling in a leadership role, oftentimes people don't necessarily want to be a leader,
okay,
but it's a way of earning more money.
Yeah.
Because the way that a lot of organizations are structured is you're in this role as an IC, and then you want to improve. So, okay, well, if I want to earn more money, then I need to take on a leadership or a management role, and perhaps I don't want to. Mm-hmm. And then perhaps I'm not trained and given the skills to be able to succeed in that role. So I don't know in a lot of cases if it's a conscious thing. I don't think people go out to be, I don't know, horrible or discompassionate or create toxic cultures or work environments. I think it's just a product of a lack of awareness and poor systems and structures within the organization.
Yeah, I think it could be because the leader, him or herself, had come to become a leader in a very, like, let's just say, a different way of working with their peers. So they kind of just are, trained in that way, and they are just don't see the difference between the approaches that they are taking, or they may have to change, right?
Agreed. Yeah, there's that question of nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
We have our beliefs, our life experiences, and so I behave a certain way because of all of my previous life experiences. Yeah. That might work in some contexts, and it might not in others. And then you have the organizational nature, or the organizational nature of the organization, and that either rewards a certain set of behaviors or doesn't. Mm-hmm. And some sets of behaviors are going to take you to where you want to go, and others are going to take you further away from that path.
Okay, and when you start the coachings with these leaders, right, how difficult, if it is, for them to change at this stage of their leadership journey?
Again, it's down to willingness. Some people are really willing. I mean, I work with people who want to change, and in that case, that's great because there's possibility for growth and things being different. I don't generally work with people who want to stay stuck where they are.
Okay, so this is where your discovery calls come into play, and then you kind of figure that out and decide if it's going to work out or not.
Absolutely, and they're seeing if I'm the right person for them as well. And listen, I'm not saying that everybody needs a coach. It's just, what do you want to achieve? Do you need some help and support in getting there? And am I the right person to help you do that? If we tick those boxes, then cool.
Okay, and I don't know. Okay, and I think as we were discussing off camera that I think coaching or hiring a coach or taking help from a coach is picking up pace because leaders do understand that they need to change their behavior to be more compassionate, more concerned about the people they work with, how they're going to present themselves. Do you also agree, because off camera you were not fully on the same page, like you still think like people are not fully open to this idea of coaching, is that correct? Or
yeah, I think, let's say maybe Estonia and other countries are slower to pick it up than, for example, the US. It's been well established there for a long period of time. They're very into personal development and coaching. They talk openly about therapy, whereas in Estonia, it's still not as widely accepted, I would say. But there were two parts to your question. That was the second part. The first part was...
It's if the coaching is picking up, they understand the need of this, right?
Yeah, I think people understand the need. It's just maybe how do you go about doing it? How do you find the right person to work with?
True.
And how do you get the results that you want? Oh, that was the other part. It can, I thought you meant picking up pace in terms of helping you get results more quickly.
Okay, we can go.
It does it does that as well in terms of picking up pace. Yeah. You might be able to get from A to B in a certain period of time, but then working with a coach or someone similar can help you stay accountable, but also get to your goals more quickly than you would potentially by yourself.
Okay, and you think in Estonia it's taking time because we still have a lot of startup culture in many companies. That's why they're more focused on the growth part and just being, we are like just gonna work it out. And once we are established, then obviously this could come into, or it could be more picked up by the leaders.
I think potentially, yeah. I think there's still, I mean, again, this exists everywhere. There's a lot of leaders who have a mindset of, I know everything, I don't need help. And, I've experienced enough of it to know that that's not true. People, and it's not about needing help, it's about wanting help. Do you actually want to make a difference? Do you want to positively impact your culture? Do you want to help your people grow and develop? And if you have that mindset, then great. But there are a lot of people in leadership and management roles who just don't have that mindset. It's all about money, and they don't really necessarily care at what cost.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, now next question I would like to ask, mainly like when you're working with teams, you have to have a good relationship between each other, which usually happens, but there are many instances where it doesn't happen as well. So let's talk about conflict. What do you think are the main reasons for conflicts other than the personality differences? What could be the other reasons?
Good question. You've got lots of good questions, tricky ones. Misalignment, poor communication. It usually comes down to the fact that we're not thinking or acting in the same way, and that just comes down to a lack of clarity. You've got Patrick Lencioni, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Don't ask me what the 5 dysfunctions are. No,
it's a very nice book.
It's a great book, it's a great read, but you've got these 5 different levels of dysfunction. I shouldn't have mentioned it because I can't remember them. But if you have a look at team dynamics and work through those different 5 levels, you'll find that, if you can eliminate or at least mitigate a lot of those, then you won't have as much conflict. But principally, as far as I'm concerned, most of it comes down to communication or lack thereof.
Okay. Do you think unrealistic expectations from each other could also be representatives?
Yeah, and again, that comes down to communications. I expect something of you, and I probably haven't verbalized that expectation, and then you do what you do, and then I get upset about that, and then I get upset, but then I don't tell you I'm upset, but I'll act out in a certain way that I am, and so it becomes this very unhealthy cycle of, well, toxicity, for want of another word.
Okay, cool. And what do you think would be the right way to deal with a conflict? Also, starting with, as you said, like some people let it go for a while. I don't agree with this approach. I think we should, if we see a conflict, we should try to, discuss it then and there with the right parties. But what do you think is the right approach for this as well?
I don't think there's always necessarily a right approach or a singular right approach. There's different styles of approaches. You can have a look at the Kilman conflict model style. There's 5 different ways that you can approach a different conflict with different and varying outcomes. But I agree with you. I think it should be addressed early.
Yeah.
And just communicate. What are the differences? Okay, how are we seeing things? What's your approach to things? Why do I have a different feeling or a different set of thoughts around this particular situation? So personally, I think there are very few things that can't be solved with a conversation.
Okay.
If you go in with the right intent. If you go in with the I'm right and you're wrong, you're never going to get to a solution. But if you go in with curiosity and figure out, okay, well, love looks at things differently. Okay, what's important to him? What's going on for him? Okay, cool. Well, let me ask some questions and then discover and then see what comes out of that, and then I can share where I'm coming from, and then hopefully we get to a point where we can resolve what hopefully is not too big of an issue.
Okay, maybe later, maybe if you have any example you can share from your coaching experience. But before that, I think there is one point that I really like that you talked about, is difference between hearing and listening. In general, we understand, the difference, but actually in reality, I think even myself, we actually don't have the consciousness to kind of have that difference in implemented in our daily life or in our office life.
Sure.
Can you just explain that concept again? Yeah.
The difference between hearing and listening.
Yeah. How is that different, and how it impacts the relationship?
Well, hearing is just the passive element of sound waves hitting your eardrum, and listening is engaging your brain and deciphering, okay, well, how do I interpret the information that I'm receiving, and how does it happen in the workplace? Well, sometimes it doesn't. We're busy doing other things, and somebody's telling us a message and we don't pick it up or receive it in the same way, and then we interpret it differently. I mean, I'm sure you've been on Zoom calls. People have their camera off and they're just doing something else. So they might be hearing what's being said, but they're not actually listening, although they claim to be listening. And then you wonder why you have to have the same conversation with somebody 2, 3 or 4 times. It's because they haven't listened to what's being said. So the impact, I think, can be quite significant if we're hearing but we're not listening. So we need to be active about, okay, well, I'm here, you're listening to me, I'm listening to you, and there's a very active process, and so I have to pay attention.
Okay. And again, I completely understand that at the moment the technology is being used so much that we are very distracted, even when we shouldn't be. Work, again, we all know what we should do, but I think if we can just reiterate it, it could just trigger the response, and maybe some few viewers could actually start implementing that. So if you can just reiterate that.
I don't know, you're the parent, you should be able to tell, but I think one of the key things is being present. So just literally being there. I mean, you can tell the difference, and I'm sure your kids can tell the difference when you're physically, mentally, emotionally there and listening to them. They'll feel it. And people can feel it as well. If I'm distracted, I mean, if you're talking to me and I don't know, I was on my phone, you're going to feel, okay, well, something is more important. Just being present, I think, is one of the key things that's going to transform. Well, that's really the key to transforming relationships. Be present, listen actively, and you'll see things change. Okay.
And again, I'm going to go back to your coaching. Do you see this as one of the areas where leaders do you point them that, hey, you gotta work on this thing as well, or they are kind of understand that already?
It depends on the person. I mean, I'm fairly blunt about things, so I usually say I'm 3 things. I'm open, so you can ask me anything and I'll share anything, and I'll ask the same in return for my clients. I'm direct, So I will tell you certain things, but I'm also caring, so I'll do it in a nice way. But on occasions, I will ask a client a question, and they'll go off on something, and then I'll stop them. I'll say, "Great, thank you for sharing. What did I ask you?"
Yeah.
And oftentimes, the question I asked and the answer that they gave are not correlated.
Okay.
Because sometimes I will hear what I want to hear, and then I will answer what I want to answer, but it's not actually the question that's being asked. So we all have this sense. I do it as well.
Yeah.
I probably did it with one of your questions earlier when we talked about the picking up pace. So I thought, oh, okay, picking up pace, that means picking up pace in terms of being able to get to your goal quicker.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't the question that you asked, which is why I then needed to go back and reiterate.
Okay, cool. Now, again, we are talking about hearing and listening, being more compassionate, being more present with the people you work with, or even with your family, wherever you are. Let's talk about one-on-ones, or having one-on-one meetings with your team. Again, all these criteria or all these points should be taken into consideration into that as well. But let's say someone is not doing that. What do you think would be the approach for the feedback now? Because we do talk about, hey, like the companies we work in, hey, we are a feedback-oriented company. We're open to feedback. But when you start giving feedback, it's just like, hey, what are you talking about? Why are you bringing these things up? What do you see there in the companies? Like, why is that?
Oh, just a whole host of different reasons. I mean, feedback is, for a lot of people, it's very uncomfortable. Yeah. But we also see feedback as purely, I'll put it in inverted commas, negative. You know, if I said, oh, look, I've got some feedback for you, it's like, oh, crap, you know, what have I done wrong? Yeah. So that's part of it. We just need to reframe it and say, well, it's just some information I'm going to provide you, and hopefully it's going to be useful for you. But that's an individual thing, so we need to get it in our heads that it's okay, it's safe, so that builds on psychological safety and trust in the relationship. But then the aspect of, okay, the information that I'm delivering to you needs to be useful to you. And I prefer the words motivational and developmental. So if I'm giving you motivational feedback, it's, okay, cool, great job, this was super, I like how you did this, please carry on doing that. And developmental is, well, it's helping you to develop. So this didn't go so well that time, what can we do differently in the future to ensure that it gets better in the future? So just using those two different words is one of the things I try to get people to use. Don't use positive and negative. Because if I said, oh, no, I've got some negative feedback for you. Oh, great, thanks, Daryl. I'm not really interested. Hey, I want to just share some feedback. I want to break it down into what you did really well, and here are some areas that we could improve upon in the future. I mean, generally, everybody wants to improve on things in the future. Yeah. And so just that reframe, I think, is a useful way of looking at it. And that's what people sometimes get wrong, is focusing on the negative too much.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now I'm thinking, like, if you come to me and say, I have some constructive feedback, psychologically my mind is could go, he's going to tell me something, but a sandwich is coming. A sandwich where feedback is coming, right?
Yeah.
But if you use the developmental feedback, that like kind of raised a bit of a positive vibes in me. Okay, he's going to tell me something that's going to help me develop, even though it could be the same thing that you were going to tell me. But I think it just changes the thought process in the mind. It just literally, I could just see or feel the difference. So I felt more positive when you use the word developmental instead of negative or even constructive. Because now we know constructive is more about, okay, you screwed up somewhere, I'm going to highlight it, and you got to improve on it, right? So
you raise a really good point about the relationship between the person receiving the feedback and the person giving the feedback is really important. But also the point that you raise is, okay, well, what are your preferences? Yeah. So I might have my preferences of how I like to receive feedback, but that might not be your preference. And so just by having that conversation, saying, look, okay, how would you like to receive feedback? Yeah. Oh, can you write it down for me? Yeah. Because I had a leader I was working with in a previous company, and I asked him, okay, how do you like to receive it? And he wanted basically a bulleted list. Okay. To give him that, and then he had that information to then have a discussion around it later. Mm-hmm. Whereas I would prefer just come and tell me, come and talk to me, and because of that I'll have some questions, and then I'd like to work through it and understand it, and then that's an easier way for me to process the feedback. And so understanding how we're different is also important.
Nice. And I wanted to talk about one-on-one as well before, but I jumped to feedback. But how important is having one-on-ones these days? Because why I'm asking is, okay, we are in Estonia. It's like very common practice having these weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly one-on-ones with the team we work with. But there are still some places, like let's just call in India, where I'm from there. There is no concept of one-on-one. It's just, I don't know, like a monthly catch-up where you're berated. Hey, yeah, you did good, but then these are the 10 areas you really screwed up. Why did you leave after 8 hours, even though we are paying you for 8 hours, but you should have been here for 12? Right? Okay. Yeah, it's a completely different work culture. I'm not like kind of criticizing it, but that's how the things are, and everyone just gets along with it, and it works. I was part of that system as well. I used to work, but I learned a lot there as well. Obviously, you are more okay to work longer hours because you have been doing that.
Sure.
You kind of, I personally feel, gives you an edge where you can outwork others in a different work culture easily, but that's a different conversation. Okay, I want to understand, like, why do you think it is so important to have these frequent one-on-ones with the team?
I think the importance varies. Because, again, I think I get boring, but a lot of my answers are it depends, because for some people, they might need really consistent feedback. That's just, they need some validation, they like the fact that they can have an ongoing or consistent or regular conversation with someone. Other people might just be, yeah, everything's fine, leave me alone, it's all good.
Okay.
So you have to balance that as a leader within a team as well, as understanding the dynamics of the team and understanding the dynamics of the individual.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to have it more regularly than this annual review. You know, I can't remember what I did last week, let alone if you asked me what I did 12 months ago. Oh, you did this. Did I? I have no concept of how I relate to that. So the shorter your feedback loops, the more connected people are to the work that they're doing. And also they'll understand, okay, this is what you did really well. Okay, I remember that. That's super cool. Okay, let me reinforce that and do that again. Okay, here's what we could do differently. Okay, right, got it. I missed A, B, and C. I'll do that differently next time. Okay. Whereas if I talk to you 6 months, hey, love, do you remember when, 6 months ago you did that thing?
Yeah.
No, I have no idea what you're talking about, or it's harder to relate to. So shorter feedback loops, I would say, better, but the cadence will depend upon the individual.
Okay, right, and I think I agree with you, because if it's like, I don't know, not a weekly, but at least a bi-weekly, it gives an opportunity for both the parties in the meeting to kind of share their thoughts and also keep each other focused on the short-term and long-term goals they are trying to achieve as a team as well.
I mean, the one-to-one as well is just an opportunity to check in. I mean, people change regularly, and if I don't speak to you for 6 months, I don't know what's going on with you. What's changed in your life? Maybe you've had a kid, maybe you've travelled, maybe you've lost somebody in the family. And so, for me, the check-in is also, how are you doing as a person? What's going on for you? Because if I understand what's going on for you as a human, then I understand that how you are impacts your work. And so as long as I'm coming from a sense of caring and compassionate place, I can understand you better and help you and support you more effectively, which then obviously is more effective for the organization, which then helps the bottom line.
Okay. I had another question on the feedback method, but you kind of covered it with it depends on the person, how they like it. So maybe we can skip it and go to the next one. Is when you're working in a team, you also are trying to achieve short-term and long-term goals, as I just mentioned. So what do you think are the good strategies from your experience working with leaders have produced good results for the teams? Any particular strategies or any particular model that you can bring out here?
Particular model or strategy that helps teams to achieve their goals? No particular model or strategy. Because again, it depends on the team and the type of work that they're doing and the stage that they're at as a team as well. I think an interesting, if you want, model, there's Tuckman's model of team formation. Because you need to look at different things things depending upon where your team is. So you can't have a high-performing team if you've just formed it, basically.
Yeah.
So I think you go through the forming, storming, norming, and then performing. These are the enforcer, and then adjourning. It doesn't rhyme. Adjourning. It's the fifth stage when you split apart. So depending on the stage that you're at within the team's progress, you're going to have different dynamics.
Yeah.
And so understanding those dynamics allow you to then potentially put a strategy in place of, okay, well, how do we get to where we want to get to? So you need to, I think it's more about having an awareness of the team, people's strengths. This is another aspect. So what are they great at? And how do you leverage those strengths in the best possible way so that people are playing to their strengths as well as collaborating, having good communication. So all of these, I mean, it's not a model, but there's different pieces that I think will make up a strategy, and then the leader needs to be aware of all those different pieces.
Okay, you just talked about these 4 stages. Would you could you just explain each stage very briefly?
Yeah, so the forming stage is literally when people just get together. The next stage is storming. So people are understanding, okay, what does love do? What are his strengths? How does he communicate? And there's this tension usually at that stage because people are trying to find, okay, well, who's more important than who reports to who. And then you get into the norming phase. So this is, okay, we understand everything about how we're getting on with each other now. We're getting into a groove.
Yeah.
And then the performing is, okay, well, now we feel super comfortable. How do we really set things up and really push each other and take each other forward collectively? How do we move ourselves into the really a high-performing team stage? And this is also, you can tie it to having high challenge, but high levels of support. That's when teams really thrive.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, or try to connect it with the previous points that we've discussed, storming is the stage where, let's just say, conflicts could be at the highest, and the last stage would be where everything is settled down, everyone understands each other's strengths and at par with each other, and the work gets normal in every way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that there's no conflict, because conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. It depends on the type of conflict. Yeah. We can be a high-performing team, but have high conflict because we just believe passionately in our own opinions. But the fact is, we have ways of being able to discuss it, sort it out, make a decision quickly, and get on to achieving whatever goals we want to achieve.
Okay, cool, nice. Now, as you have been working with the leaders for years now, you have developed your own methodology. If you can talk a bit more about it, because I found it very interesting. I would really love to hear it from you about it.
Okay, so I mean, it's quite simple in a sense. So I work on 3 areas. So the confidence, competence, and then communication. So confidence is, well, who are they as a person? So what are their doubts, insecurities? How imposter syndrome comes into that one as well. So building their level of confidence in their role as a leader. Then you have a look at the competence, and that's looking at some of the skills. So effective delegation, how do you resolve conflict effectively, deal with tricky conversations, how do you set goals not only for yourself but for others. So the skills and competencies that you need to be an effective leader, and then that's combined with communication. So how do you say what you say, and is it having the impact on the results that you want?
Okay, and again, I know it depends on the person, but on average, which stage takes you longer when you're doing these coaching sessions with leaders?
They're not really separate stages because they all blend in to each other, and it depends. I mean, I generally work with people for 6 months because behaviour change takes time, and then you want to reinforce those behaviours and have people be accountable in achieving their goals. Some people I work with for longer, but generally 6 months, and you're going to be good.
Good to go. Good. And do you see them changing their approaches once you're done? Or let's say you did that with 6 months with me, but we meet after 2 years, and I'm still doing the same thing. What you told me to do after that?
I would have failed in doing what I was doing. I mean, listen, some people can see results after one call. I mean, dynamically, it depends on the individual and what they're going to take on. But shifting a mindset can be done quite quickly. It depends then how well or how quickly people want to integrate it. Okay. But I mean, I've had people, we've talked about certain things, they put it into place, like, oh, okay, it worked. Yeah, it does.
And this behavioral change sticks with them, obviously, because now they have changed their behavior. It's going to stick with them. And after how long they get back to, obviously, the 6 months are done, do you have these leaders coming back to you, hey, I'm like really sticking to these two things, but this one thing I really need like some time with you again. Does that happen as well?
It hasn't happened.
Okay.
I mean, I hope it doesn't. I mean, what I find amusing is that I've had a few people come back and say, "Oh, I have your voice in my head." Okay, good. I mean, it's slightly weird, but whenever they're, I don't know, about to make a decision, or they just say, oh, "Okay, I can hear your voice in my head, Daryl, saying I don't do that or don't do this." Or,
Okay.
so maybe I just traumatize people enough to not go back to their bad habits.
Okay. I think I should have asked you this question before when we started talking about coaching. So before you get into this partnership with these leaders, you kind of shadow them to understand how they are like doing all these things in person, or what is the process?
Not yet.
Okay.
This is something that I'd like to do.
Okay.
This is I guess an offer that I'm creating at the moment. So often, if I'm not embedded in an organisation, then I just work one-on-one with people, and we have a Zoom call, or I go and have coffee with them. But it's taken very much out of context. My idea for something going forward would be, okay, as a leader, I would just follow you around for a whole week non-stop, seeing how you interact with people in the organisation. We would talk about it at break and at lunch and dinner and things like this, but it's a really deep dive where I get to see you in your natural environment. Because if I'm working one-on-one with somebody, generally we're out of our usual environment, we're having a call. And so I want to see people in their natural habitat, because then you can't turn anything off.
Yeah.
You know, you give somebody a sneer, or you just roll your eyes at somebody, and I can see that, and then we can delve into, okay, well, what does that mean? So that's something I'd like to create, which is only for people who either are a bit mad or very brave.
Yeah. And so at the moment it's the Zoom call, and then it's like frequent calls or meetings in person that you guys discuss this.
Yeah, usually once every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Some clients I work with weekly, because they need a greater level of accountability.
Okay.
And also I have one client at the moment, she's going through a tough transition with work. I mean, I've spoken to her pretty much every day for the past 4 days, just helping her work through some of the anxiety and the challenges that she's facing. So it depends. I mean, if you want me, then you have me for that period of time, but I don't put any set time limit on how we have to work together, because it's going to be based on your needs. I just want to get you to where you want to be as quickly as possible.
Okay. Another thing, I was listening to your Agile Prague presentation.
Okay.
Right? And that's where I found that model that I emailed you about, like 7%, 35%.
Moravian.
Yeah, Moravian. If we can talk just a little about it, because we are like 28 minutes in.
Okay.
Maybe we can talk maybe 5 minutes about.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Moravian was a psychologist, although I have to preface this with what was said was taken a little bit out of context, essentially. But it's useful, I think, to illustrate sometimes just the nature of how we speak and the nature of communication. So he said that, or again, was quoted as saying, so 7% of all communication is words, 38% is tone,
Okay.
and then 55%. Is that the maths?
I think so. It'll add up. Yeah.
And then 55% is body language.
Yeah.
So a large proportion of how we communicate. Like, I'm talking with my hands now. I'm thinking, okay, am I serious or am I lighthearted? You can tell by my body. So yeah, a large proportion of it is body language. Less is tone, and then the actual words that we're saying is only 7%. And in certain circumstances, it makes sense. If we get an email, we can read anything. What?
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. Why are they angry with me or something like that? And then you can pick up the phone and say, no, not at all. Because we can't pick up tone or body language from an email. It's just words. And so, okay, there's a lot of room for miscommunication. I've seen, I don't know, whole pages of Slack messages with people just pinging messages back and forth. That's really really angry, just pick up the phone. It's just a really easy misunderstanding. So even just tone, you'll understand, okay, am I angry? Or am I quite relaxed and calm? So yeah, it's an interesting model, I think, to highlight potential differences in how we receive information when we are communicating.
Okay, and I want to talk about tone because I personally, I don't actually, I'm aware of when my tone changes usually. Like it happens, like maybe with my family, and my wife will be worrying, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Like the tone changes, but I'm not aware of it. Like, what could be done to kind of be more aware of these things on, like, let's just say at work or with family?
Great question, and just raising your awareness, just being aware of your state, because our state influences how we are and how we respond and how we act and how we behave. And so oftentimes we're not aware that our state has changed. So if something happens, because the body is all about stimulus and response, so I'm responding to a stimulus, but am I aware of what that stimulus is? So if somebody comes in and starts shouting at me, I'm going to feel tense and annoyed and tight, and then my next interaction is probably going to be coming from that tense, tight place. So that is then going to impact the interaction I have with the other person. So just understanding how we're feeling and what's going on with us is already the first stage. Beyond that, it's just a question of practice.
Okay. I need a lot of practice then, because it happens.
We all do. I mean, meditation, it works for me. It's allowed me to be a little bit more calmer, and I like this notion of, so when we have a stimulus, sometimes we react. And what meditation has at least allowed me is I don't react, I respond. So there's a little gap between the stimulus and then, okay. And then I can either choose to react in the same way or I can choose to respond a little bit differently. And I'm not saying it's perfect 100% of the time, but sometimes even after I've then reacted, I'll catch myself and think, oh, okay, well, why did I do that? And that allows me already to change things going forward.
So it's, if something crazy is happening around you, just give yourself time to think and then respond instead of just hearing and just start reacting to it.
Yeah, I mean, a stupid example or a silly example, again, so for me it's using language sometimes is okay, I don't need to call it stupid, I can call it silly. I broke a glass. So I just dropped on the floor and shattered everywhere. And I think in a previous iteration of myself, I would have sworn, I would have got upset, I would have said, oh God, I'm such an idiot. Why? I didn't. It was just, oh, okay, fine, I'll just clear it up. And just no reaction at all, just very, very neutral. And that, again, it's a small example, but it's a difference of, okay, well, how would I have behaved previously? I would have reacted, as opposed to now it was just, okay, well, that's fine. So I just get to choose a different way of being.
I personally think, and I've kind of seen the change in myself, that awareness is coming to me when I see other people doing the same thing and then them reacting like crazy, and I think I would do the same, but then I think why? So that kind of puts me in a place where I'm like getting more aware. You think working and analyzing others around you could also help you to become more aware of these things?
Of course, if they're doing similar things, but again, that's why I have a coach as well, it's because I have my blind spots, there's things that I'm unaware of. But an interesting piece of raising awareness is I sent a voice note to somebody the other day, and then for some reason I decided to look at the transcript, and I was horrified at the transcript because the quality of my English was awful. And looking at it was, well, I can't. Okay, now I've raised my consciousness over the fact, or raised my awareness over the fact that, okay, well, maybe I'm not as eloquent as I think I am. There's some things to work on there. So anything that's going to raise your self-awareness about your behavior, about your words, about your actions, is all going to be useful. So whether that comes from other people, whether it comes from a coach or a mentor or something like that, then.
Okay. Now, thank you very much, Daryl. But before we finish it up, how can viewers reach out to you if you want to share your LinkedIn, you're very active on LinkedIn, and I read like very like many posts from you, and those are like generally very good as well. Like now you just started, don't do this, do this. That's like quite thought provoking. Like when you see it. But what other mediums or social platforms that you find you on?
Yeah, mainly LinkedIn, and I am on Instagram. I have a love-hate relationship with social media.
Okay.
LinkedIn is probably the best way. I mean, I can give you my Instagram later as well if people can reach out there.
Cool. I'll pop it up on the screen, and it will be in the description as well. Once again, thank you very much. It was very informative for me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the time and the space.
Cool. Thanks.